Ladies and gentlemen, Behind the Line proudly presents to you another exciting edition of the Woke Turning On the Woke. This episode is brought to you by Woke Beta Pi. Are you lonely and looking for pretend friends? Are you looking to surround yourself with a strong support group of woke men pretending to be women? Are you tired of spending lonely Friday nights spanking the wanker and have a strong desire for an all-male slumber party without the burden of toxic masculinity? If you are yearning to gaze into feminine male eyes, join the inclusive fraternity at Woke Beta Pi. Woke Beta Pi is the solution to lonely weekends. We offer sleeping bags to new recruits, shared bedrooms for our leaders, and on Wednesday nights, we host the highly competitive contest of wanker beaters. Join our inclusive fraternity today by sending your application to Feminine Fred. There's a reason that Woke Beta Pi is looking for new members. There is a reason that this inclusive fraternity has suddenly opened up the books for new recruits. Over the weekend, I received a message from one of my inside sources. KC, CNN has been kicked out of Woke Beta Pi. Attached are pictures of Wolf Blitzer howling at the moon after he heard the news. Ahoo! Now, obviously, Woke Beta Pi doesn't really exist, but the sentiment of the story is real. CNN has been kicked out of Woke United Methodist. Their deacon status has been revoked. They are no longer allowed to attend Sunday morning services. The situation's gotten so bad, CNN's weekly tithe, it was returned to sender. They don't even want their money. The question is, why? After years of dedicated service, after years of spreading lies and propaganda, after years of dedicating themselves to the woke wiener, why would CNN be evicted from Woke United Methodist? Like I told you guys last week, CNN President Mark Thompson, he's forcing the network to change directions. He's trying to steer the ass of the Titanic away from the supersized cucumber. Mark Thompson is trying to save the network. He's trying to convince people to actually watch this turd. In order to do that, Mark Thompson knows that CNN has to create content that is appealing to normal people. First, he laid off 200 unknowns behind the scenes. Then, he ordered the unknowns on the air to be neutral with their coverage of the Trumper. For example, Jake the Bongo Tapper was no longer allowed to say, "Orange Man bad!" Caitlin Collins, Katie Roo! Katie Roo! The Roo was no longer allowed to be condescending while talking about the Trumper. Now, she is still allowed to be insufferable. She's still allowed to lack charisma, but Mark Thompson knows there's really not much he can do about that. Even though she is aesthetically appealing, he knows there's nothing he can do to make the Roo audibly appealing. At this point, Caitlin Collins is what she is. She's got the charisma of a raisin. Whether or not this new strategy works, that remains to be seen, but credit to Mark Thompson for at least trying. Problem is, this desperate attempt to appeal to normal people, this final ploy to monetize this polished turd, it's come with a sunk cost, because CNN now stands alone in the mainstream media. Do you think you were better off alone? CNN no longer has the support. CNN no longer has the woke love from their former pretend friends in the mainstream media. Make sure to like and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at KC_BTL84. Link to the second channel's in the description below. Today on the second channel, talking about the egregious officiating in the AFC Championship game last night and whether or not the NFL influenced the outcome of the game. So if you haven't already, head over to the second channel and subscribe. How many of you guys have ever heard of Oliver Darcy? Anyone? No one's heard of Darcy before? That's okay. That's okay. I wouldn't expect Oliver to be known outside of his small group of friends and family. He has spent the last few years working at CNN, where everyone is unknown. It should be obvious as to why Oliver Darcy was initially hired by CNN. He's got 2 first names. I have never seen a network employ so many unrecognizable faces with 2 first names: Andy Cooper, Abby Phillip, Oliver Darcy. Then you have someone like Wolf Blitzer, who has 2 unique names. Oliver Darcy is no longer collecting woke welfare from CNN. I don't know if he was fired or he chose to jump off the Titanic before it sunk. More than likely, probably a combination of both. CNN probably hired Oliver Darcy hoping he could dominate the super nerd demographic, but there were 2 problems with that strategy. Number 1, Oliver Darcy is a dork, not a nerd. And number 2, MSNBC has that market dominated with the real super nerd, Chris Hayes. Over the last few months, Oliver Darcy, he's trying to make a living by selling newsletters that require a subscription. I don't know anyone who's paying for it. Hell, I don't know anyone who's even heard of Oliver Darcy, much less willing to pay for his musings. But apparently, the unknowns at something called the On the Media podcast, apparently, they are big fans of our new friend Oliver. Shows hosted by some dude named Micah Lowinger. He invited Oliver on the show to discuss the new and improved CNN. As someone who used to collect woke welfare from the Cemetery News Network, Oliver Darcy, he could provide some insight into their new strategy. But instead of providing insight, Darcy took this as an opportunity to criticize his former subsidizer for appealing to normal people. Like I said earlier, one of the main ways that CNN is trying to appeal to normal people is by providing honest coverage of the Trumper, or as honest as the coverage can be at CNN. I guess a better word would be unbiased coverage. Oliver Darcy, he is pissed off. He's very, very bitter about this new direction at the network. Ollie was angry because CNN failed to highlight important points during the inauguration last week. CNN failed to inform its dwindling audience about the things that really matter. Important things like the Trumper being a convicted felon, or that he was impeached twice during his first term. Ollie was also upset because CNN failed to recognize and call out the extremist. Well, Casey, was he talking about the potential terrorist who accepted Johnny B. Biden's invitation to the undocumented migrants but bongo festival? No, Oliver was talking about the real extremist, dangerous people like Tucker Carlson and Robert Kennedy Jr. Oliver describes CNN's coverage of Trump as limp when it used to be stiff. Ooh, I miss the big stiffy. But it was his second point that actually caught my attention. Oliver Darcy touched on something unintentionally that I mentioned last week, and it's the reason that I think this new strategy at CNN is going to be a huge embarrassing failure. Ollie claimed that we are seeing the same unrecognizable faces at CNN, but their attitudes toward the Trumper are completely different. Listen for yourself.
Very stark difference in the way CNN is covering Donald Trump and politics compared to the way it did under a previous owner. One of the noticeable things, for instance, during inauguration coverage was that none of the CNN anchors pointed out that Donald Trump is the first convicted felon to take that office. They didn't point out that he was twice impeached. You had a lot of right-wing extremists and a lot of right-wing conspiracy theorists stuffed in the rotunda. People like Tucker Carlson, an extremist, Marjorie Taylor Greene, an extremist, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a conspiracy theorist, and Jake Tapper was pretty tame.
Watching this second term begin, those anchors were still physically present on my screen. Like Jake Tapper was still there, but it felt like a very different Jake Tapper.
And that's not an accident. That's the direction that new network chief Mark Thompson wants to take the network. Jeff Zucker, he really encouraged anchors to be relentless, to be vocal about the lies that Donald Trump is pushing, Mark Thompson had his anchors gathered for a Sunday afternoon meeting, and he made it very clear that he did not want to focus on those things. It's just a very different CNN and tone than it was 4 years ago.
Oliver Darcy is right. Jake the Bongo Tapper is still there. Pampers Brown is still there. We are still seeing Wolf and his wrinkles, but their tones have changed. CNN is no longer creating fake outrage. They are no longer fabricating stories of mythical racism. Mark Thompson is forcing his untalented anchors to be unbiased with their coverage of the Trumper. But like I told you guys last week, it ain't gonna work because it's too late. After years of propaganda, normal people aren't going to trust Jake the Bongo Tapper. Normal people aren't going to suddenly start watching Caitlin Collins because she is pretending to be fair. If you want this to work, you gotta bring in new faces, new voices. Hell, you need to bring them in, period. Even if you were still in the business of fabrication, CNN would need to bring in new liars because their current lineup of liars can't draw flies to a fresh turd. Oliver Darcy criticized Mark Thompson for not being more like Jeff Zucker. When my good friend Jeffrey was running CNN, he encouraged us to be relentless. Peel that orange, remove those seeds, look for stories of racism involving the Trumper, and if you can't find facts, make shit up. Once again, Oliver Darcy is right. Jeff Zucker opened the doors of the Bruce caboose and he allowed the woke fungus to take over. From 2016 to 2020, the strategy worked. Back in 2020, CNN was the #1 network on cable. But what Oliver Darcy is failing to realize is that gimmick became stale. That's one of the reasons that Jeff Zucker is no longer running CNN. It's one of the reasons that CNN has their third president in 4 years. You're no longer drawing an audience by spreading the woke fungus. It is not just Oliver Darcy turning against CNN. Most of their pretend friends in the mainstream media have turned against them. Headline at The Nation: CNN surrenders to Trump. Like Oliver Darcy, The Nation is criticizing CNN for taking it easy on the Trumper. What they don't understand is this has nothing to do with Trump. If relentlessly criticizing the Trumper would draw ratings, that is exactly what CNN would be doing. But Mark Thompson knows it ain't gonna work. And the reason it won't work is because normal people don't want to hear it. Like I told you guys the other day, CNN is not surrendering to Donald Trump. CNN is surrendering to you. If Oliver Darcy were smart, he would be doing the same thing. If he did, maybe subscriptions for his doofus newsletter would increase from nothing to almost nothing. Give me your thoughts on this. Oliver Darcy trashes his former employer. CNN's former pretend friends in the media are turning against him. Do you think we're going to start seeing people quit CNN? Guys like Jake Tapper or Andy Cooper, people who aren't comfortable being fair to the Trumper. Could we start seeing them quit the network? Let me know. Sound off in the comments below. Best way to contact me is through email, btlkc84@gmail.com. I'll see you guys later.